Yo, what's going on, people? It's your boy Huncho, and this is Cases Season 1, Episode 9, the Abdullahi Tarabi case, aka Teewizz from NGang.
Been having man on road. Back on the main of them roads. Aye, slapping and shaving a goal. Stacking and saving a no.
Abdullahi Tarabi, aged 19, more known by his aliases Teewizz or T1, was a UK drill rapper from Northolt. Teewizz would represent NGang, and only a few songs have ever been released, but it's said that if Teewizz was around today, he would have become something big, given the climate of how big his peers are and of how big his opposition is. Teewizz's family had moved from their native land of Somalia, and his dad would go on to tell reporters that they had moved to England for a better life. He'd been studying sports science and was going to attend Brunel University in September of 2017 because he wanted to become a football coach. The BBC Sound series The File on 4, the episode called Criminal Records, would go on and interview Teewizz's mum Fauzia, and she would go on to say that Teewizz, being the youngest of his brothers, was extremely close to her. According to Fauzia, Teewizz had told her that he was going to make it as a football coach and was going to provide an even better life for her. She would go on to say that he would never stray, would always be at home on time, and that he never used to do anything bad and always thought of her well-being. Now, even though Teewizz was somewhat known, it wouldn't be until after his death that he would be widely known in the drill scene. And a lot of people have been wanting me to cover Teewizz's story since I started doing this cases series, and one of the reasons why there's so much anticipation around his name is that his unfortunate passing had made a massive change to the UK drill scene moving forward, but we'll get into that towards the end of the video. On a quick side note, NGang has beef with Rayners Lane and 1011 or CGM. Some people have said that Teewizz used to pressure 1011 quite a lot, and that's why 1011 mock his death so much, but this is widely debated. So the case of Teewizz started on the 11th of April 2017. It was the Easter holiday, so he had slept in, and his mum had shouted him down a few minutes before 3 PM as she had cooked him lunch. When he had come down, he said he didn't want anything to eat and that he'd be back in 5 minutes, but I'm unsure as to the reason at this moment as to why he went out. It'd be sometime later that Teewizz would get into an altercation, which at this current time is thought to have been Rayners Lane members, and it was reported that at that time he had ran towards an alleyway in Newnham Close but had failed to run any more, and Teewizz was stabbed once in the stomach. The two attackers then had fled the scene. Witnesses said that Teewizz had shouted out for help before his brother tried dragging him to safety of a nearby house in Newnham Close. Then at 3:20 PM, paramedics from London's ambulance service had rushed to the cul-de-sac to report of a male being stabbed in Newnham Close in Northolt, which was roughly about 100 yards away from his family home. There, they had found Teewizz suffering from a stab wound. When they arrived, it was heard they were fighting to save his life as his family was screaming at the scene. The London's ambulance service would go on to call police once they arrived at the scene and would show up minutes later. He was then rushed from the scene to hospital and was unfortunately pronounced dead just after 5:35 PM. After the incident had happened, forensic officers could be seen combing through the estate for evidence. One neighbour, who did not want to be named, said he saw Teewizz desperately fleeing across the road from two men of a similar age. He said, "I was coming home from buying my son food. When I saw the boy running, I stopped my car to see what was happening. I saw the two guys chasing the boy down the alleyway. The boy was running, but he couldn't run anymore. They stabbed him once and ran away, and he was calling, 'Help, help.' It was something that I didn't want my son to see. It's still in his mind. It's going to disturb him for a while. It was a long knife. I thought it was a joke at first. It was like a movie. Even the way that they stabbed him, it was so quick. He didn't even touch him. It was a nightmare." A murder investigation was then launched by the Homicide and Major Crime Command Unit, and on the day of his murder, 4 males, 3 19-year-olds and an 18-year-old had been arrested on suspicion of attempted murder, and they were taken into custody at separate London police stations. After finding out the news about Teewizz's passing, the charges were then changed to suspicion of murder. DC Andy Partridge, leading the investigation, would go on to say at the time, "The deplorable attack took place in broad daylight in a residential location. I would like to hear from anyone who saw the attack itself or witnessed anything else that may be important. Whilst arrests have been made, we are keen to trace a man who had fled the scene in the direction of Petts Hill." A day later, on the 12th of April 2017, people had gathered in the afternoon to pay tribute to Teewizz. A group of men laid flowers around a phone near the spot where he unfortunately had lost his life. After carefully arranging bunches of flowers, one uncorked a bottle of brandy and poured it around them. The young men then stood in silent remembrance. Minutes later, more arrived at the scene. One of the people at the scene, Amran Karsh, told reporters, "We grew up together. each holiday, each school break, either my family would go to his house or his family would come to mine. It's shocking to hear this because he was like my brother. He was just a really good young person. He loved his family well. On this same day, the 4 males who were arrested originally were released on bail whilst investigations continued. Then, on the 13th of April 2017, a post-mortem examination was held at Uxbridge Mortuary and confirmed that he had died as a result of a stab wound to the abdomen. On this day, police would go on to arrest a 16-year-old boy in Harrow on suspicion of murder. Then, on the 14th of April 2017, police would go on and arrest a 17-year-old boy on suspicion of murder in North London. The 16 and 17-year-old were being held in custody at North London police stations, and it's been alleged that one of these two, and I'm unsure whether it's the 16 or 17-year-old, was T. Rose from Rayners Lane. A day later, on the 15th of April 2017, the 2 boys from Harrow would then go on to be charged with murder, and they were to appear at Hendon Magistrates Court later on that day. After that brief hearing, they were to appear in custody at the Old Bailey on the 18th of April 2017. Here, they were facing charges of murder and possession of a pointed and bladed object. So on the 18th of April 2017, they made their first Old Bailey court appearance via video link from Warrington Young Offenders Institution in Stoke-on-Trent. The boys spoke only to confirm their names during this brief hearing. Prosecutor Dorian Lovell-Pank QC said, "This is a case of murder. The 2 defendants are aged 16 and 17 respectively. The victim was a 19-year-old boy. The murder was by way of a single stab wound to the trunk of the body." Judge Richard Marks QC said the pair will next appear in court for a plea and trial preparation hearing on the 5th of July 2017, and he set a date of the 25th of September 2017 for a trial, which was expected to last between 2 and 3 weeks, and at this current time there's no further reports of that further court date. So the trial had been moved to an earlier date for an unknown reason, and the first trial date would start on the 19th of September 2017. At this hearing, it was heard that Teewizz referenced celebrity chef Gordon Ramsay as he was being chased down the alleyway and stabbed to death in front of horrified local residents. The court was shown CCTV footage of Teewizz shouting "back the Ramsay," and on the CCTV footage, he can also be heard shouting "ah" after suffering a fatal knife wound to the stomach which cut a major blood vessel and left part of his intestines hanging out. Explaining the words "back the Ramsay," prosecutor Duncan Penny QC said, "Believe it or not, it's some sort of reference to the celebrity chef Mr. Gordon Ramsay. In shouting "back the Ramsay," it would appear that Abdullahi was asking his friends or his brother for a weapon with which to defend himself from the imminent attack. Mr. Penny said the Crown alleges that each of these defendants participated in a joint attack. Each of them is accordingly responsible for his murder. At least one blow aimed towards the deceased by his attackers following the pursuit down the alleyway also appears to have been recorded on that footage. It was heard in court that Teewizz had been with his friends and his older brother Abdi Rahman shortly before he was confronted near a roundabout at the junction of Witten Avenue West and Woodend Lane. Witnesses saw him being chased across the roundabout and down an alleyway towards Newnham Close. One man, Tapiwa Shumba, saw Teewizz turn around and put his hands up as he was caught by the attackers. Mr. Penny said the man with the knife raised his arm and brought the knife downwards towards Abdullahi. One of Abdullahi's friends also saw one of the suspects stab Abdullahi once in the belly with a black-tipped blade using an upwards motion. His friends and older brother Abdi Rahman had rushed to his side, dragged him into a nearby porch, and a few seconds later, Teewizz had collapsed in the arms of a local resident outside a house in Newnham Close. After the attack, the 2 suspects then ran back towards the alleyway, briefly chased by the 4 men, including Teewizz's brother, and it was sadly reported that Teewizz's family had left the courtroom in tears as the video and audio footage was being played in court. A passing bus driver noticed one of the attackers had a quote-unquote big backside and was struggling to keep up with the other one, who appeared to be trying to hide a knife in his trousers. And as we previously spoken about, it was then heard in court that Teewizz was treated by paramedics at the scene and was then taken to St Mary's Hospital, where he was unfortunately pronounced dead later on that afternoon. Then, after the trial had wrapped up on the 4th of October 2017, it was heard that the 2 teenagers were cleared of all charges after they had claimed they had acted in self-defense. Shortly before the not guilty verdicts were returned, jurors asked if they had to be unanimous in determining a verdict of self-defense in relation to one of the defendants. And on this day, it was heard that the judge had slammed witnesses who refused to help the police. Relatives of Teewizz sobbed at the Old Bailey as the verdicts were being given. After the pair were cleared, Judge Nicholas Cook said, "Very few people are prepared to help the police with murder cases. Had somebody helped the police, the outcome might have been different." Now, as I said at the start of the video, Teewizz's death would mark a historic moment in the UK drill scene. After he was murdered, multiple songs would be made mocking his death, but out of respect for him and his family, I won't be playing them in this video, but a lot of you watching will know the songs that I'm talking about. One of these groups was known as 1011 or CGM, as we previously spoken about, and allegedly Teewizz used to pressure 1011 a lot before his death, and this is the reason why 1011 made so many songs mocking his death, even though that no 1011 or CGM members were ever involved in the murder case or in fact ever arrested over Teewizz's death. So why did Teewizz's death mark a change in the history of UK drill music? Well, on the 9th of November 2017, 5 1011 or CGM members, that being Micah Bedell or Horrid One, Jonas Germer or TY, Isaac Marshall or Emscom, Jordan Bedell or Savo, and Reese Herbert or Digger D, had armed themselves with machetes, knives and baseball bats as they allegedly had planned a revenge attack on a rival gang, that being 12 World from Shepherd's Bush, after 12 World members had threatened and harassed Savo and Horrid One's grandmother for being in the wrong postcode. It was heard in Kingston Crown Court at the time that a clip had been circulating on social media with the caption, "Micah, come get your grandma, she's lacking on our strip," with another gang member adding, "You're lucky I don't rock her face. Horrid One, come get your nan." When the group was intercepted by police in Notting Hill, they claimed their weapons were props for a music video, but Judge Anne Mulligan said she was certain serious violence would have followed if they had not been arrested. It was heard that investigators had spent 2 years gathering evidence on the gang's music and social media accounts before the arrest, and in May of 2018, the group had pleaded guilty to the charges brought against them, that being conspiracy to commit violent disorder, and they were due to be sentenced on June the 11th, 2018. And it was heard at this time that on top of the sentence for violent disorder, the police wanted to put a CBO or criminal behaviour order on the group that would prevent them from making music that would quote unquote reference violence. And they'd wanted this order to be put in place for the 5 years following, which at that point would have ran until 2023. And it was reported that prosecutors was to present 7 videos made by 1011 to the court as evidence in support of the order. Then on the 11th of June 2018, all 5 gang members were given custodial sentences, and a decision regarding the CBOs was to be made on the 15th of June 2018. And on that date, the group were hit with a court order that banned them from making music without police permission. In this CBO, it banned 1011 from mentioning death or injury and mentioning named postcodes in a gang context. And they also had to notify police within 24 hours of releasing new videos and give 48 hours warning of the date and location of any performance or recording and permit officers to attend. And what joins all of this together is the fact that 1011 were not to mention any reference to the death of Teewizz. This was supposed to be active for 3 years. So with Teewizz's death not allowed to be mentioned, any mention of dead people moving forward, the police had decided to start taking these songs down from YouTube. So this is how Teewizz's unfortunate passing had impacted the drill scene moving forward. Because before this, we had seen about 30 videos taken down through Scotland Yard's Operation Domain, but after this case, the police would crack down on drill music, and as we can see today, the censorship on the genre has heightened massively. Now, what a lot of drill fans won't understand is the impact that when mentioning a dead person on a song, the impact that it actually has on that person's family. Now, I referenced the BBC Sound series File on 4 with the episode Criminal Records, and I just want you to take a listen because we get a little insight to how this affects family members. Teewizz's sister would go on to say this regarding Teewizz's name being mentioned in certain songs.
It shouldn't be up on YouTube. It should be one of YouTube's guidelines to take that down when somebody puts something like that up. It's not nice. It's disgusting.
How does that, as his sister, affect you, that his death is being mocked on YouTube? How does that feel?
It's emotionally hard. It's hard to grasp. Gives you sleepless nights, makes you cry. It's not easy.
And that is the Abdullahi Tarabi case, aka Teewizz from NGang. And I just want to take this time out to pay my respects and say rest in peace to Abdullahi, and my condolences are with his family at this current time. Now, what's interesting but also extremely sad is that it would only be a few months later, towards the end of the year, on the 18th of November 2017, an 18-year-old by the name of Jason Isaac attacks, was killed on Newnham Street very close to where Teewizz had passed, and he was murdered by Joel Monday and his accomplices in a completely unprovoked attack after Jason had switched his plans from going to the cinema to go into a party nearby. After a trial at the Old Bailey, Joel was sentenced to serve a minimum of 20 years in prison in May of 2019. But yeah, if you like this series so far, give the video a thumbs up, let me know what you guys think of this in the comment section below, and if you want the latest drill, street and music news out of the UK, be sure to hit the subscribe button and the notification bell. It's been your boy Huncho, and I'm out.